Easter Unbunnyleavable by Uncle Perry. It was just before Easter. Lucian and Zach were watching TV. It was Here Comes Peter Cottontail. They both really enjoyed it. They loved it so much, they both asked for a pet bunny for Easter. Their dad told them, as long as you understand that they'll have to stay outside in a habitat cage, the rabbits, not the kids, and you'll be responsible for feeding them and cleaning the inside of their cage. They both eagerly agreed. Their dad later took them to the pet store to pick out a couple of rabbits. Well, there weren't many to choose from, being so close to Easter, but they made a decision. Lucian picked an almost black one, and Zach a black and white spotted, floppy-eared one. Their dad had the store employee double-check the sex on them. He knew better than to get a boy and a girl and put them in the same cage. He kind of splurged on the cage a little. He got one with a ramp that leads up to a little barn. It was really cute. They set it up right outside the back door. That way, the kids can get to it easily and quickly. Easter came and went, and Lucian and Zach were surprisingly taking pretty good care of the bunnies. They only had to be reminded to feed them once in a while, and the cage was pretty much self-cleaning since it had a chicken wire floor. After about a month, one of the rabbits turned up missing. The door was closed and the cage was still snapped shut. No holes were dug around the edges, and the cage itself was still intact. It's like it just disappeared into thin air. It was the solid black one. Lucian was very distraught. Zach told him they could share his rabbit. Lucian, of course, wanted his back. Dad told them he'd try to find out what happened to Lucian's rabbit if they agreed to share. Zach agreed to the compromise. Lucian eventually warmed up to the agreement. Now their dad had to hold up his end of the bargain, which was fine with him. He was dubiously curious what really happened to the rabbit. So on a late Saturday afternoon, he decided to ask the neighbors if they've seen a black rabbit running through their yard. Some of them looked at him sideways and said no, and quickly closed the door. The others believed him and said they haven't, but they'll keep an eye out for it. The only other place they could be would be the woods out back. They lead down into a forested valley. It was getting late, so he grabbed a flashlight, figuring he'll be getting back after dark. As he was walking, he could hear birds chirping and the sound of the leaves crunching below his feet. After a while, he noticed what looked like a deer trail through the leaves. He started following it, thinking he might see a deer. After about 100 yards or so, he saw something on the side of a tree up ahead of him. As he got closer, his dread turned to horror. It was Lucian's bunny stuck to the tree. There were some strange symbols or drawings on the tree trunk around it. They were red and drippy and, well, still wet. It was probably the rabbit's blood. Its head was missing. Its body was nailed to the tree, like a mini bearskin rug. Bones were laying in a circle below the tree. Their dad was creeped out and furious at the same time. He quickly stomped back to the house, got in his car, and drove off. He came back about an hour and a half later. He had bought an infrared security camera and he installed it above the rabbit cage. He also bought a small padlock for the cage door. The camera has a motion sensor on it and only records when there's movement, so reviewing the footage each day would be pretty easy. Weeks went by and nothing happened. Then, one day, the other rabbit went missing. Not only that, but the cage was turned upside down. Dad checked his camera footage. A person who was wearing a hooded cloak that looked like it was made of rabbit fur approached the cage. They pointed at the rabbit, and 3 other people in cloaks came into the screen. 2 of them lifted the cage, while the third grabbed the bunny before it escaped. They then laid the cage upside down and slowly walked off the screen. "What the?" their dad muttered to himself. He told the kids he couldn't find the rabbit, but he promised he would keep looking. Later on, when he was trying to go to sleep, he noticed red lights coming through the bedroom window. He got up and looked out the window into the backwoods. He saw a line of red lights floating through the middle of the woods. He snuck out to investigate. He crept outside, quietly closing the door. He could still see the lights, so he followed them. He tried sneaking through the dried leaves, but it was nearly impossible. After a while, as he was following them, he noticed that they stopped moving. They seemed to be gathering in one area. He needed to get a closer look. He got close enough to see in detail what was going on. They were holding red lanterns and chanting something. It sounded like a Gregorian chant, like the monks do. He watched intently. The monk with the rabbit cloak walked to the center of their circle. They held up a rabbit. It was his kid's rabbit! They started saying what sounded like some kind of a prayer. One of the other cloaked figures took the rabbit from his hand and placed it on a stump. The rabbit-cloaked monk pulled out a hatchet or meat cleaver and in one stroke beheaded the bunny. They all started chanting again as the bunny kicked and twitched while blood pumped out of its grisly stump. Dad almost said something, but he caught himself. There were too many of them for him to challenge them, and they obviously had a weapon. He didn't. He needed to call the police, which he no doubt should have done already. He cautiously raised up a little and started to turn when a branch snapped. All the hoods turned in his direction. He froze for a second, hoping they didn't see him. When they turned their lanterns in his direction, he was lit up like a Christmas tree. He jumped up and raced in the opposite direction. As he was scampering away, he could hear the multitude of footsteps running through the leaves behind him. They were getting louder. He finally made it through the woods and into his backyard. He sprinted to the back door, slung it open, slammed it shut, and locked both doors. He looked through the window and saw the red lanterns gathered at the tree line in the backyard. They didn't enter his backyard for some reason. He scrambled upstairs to his bedroom, grabbed his gun by the bed and his phone. He went over to his bedroom window and dialed 911. The lanterns were still gathered at the tree line. He reported to the 911 operator what was going on. She told him she will send the police immediately. He continued to watch his backyard. In a few minutes, he could hear sirens in the distance. As the sirens got closer, the red lanterns started disappearing. He told the cops what he witnessed. At first, the cops didn't believe him. It was only when he showed them his CCTV footage that they started taking him seriously. They called in some other units and started scouring the woods. They came back and said they couldn't find anyone or any trace of what he described happening. He asked about the rabbit on the tree. The cops said they found a tree with a spray-painted solid black circle on it, but no rabbit nailed to a tree or blood-smeared symbols. I told the kids that somebody had stolen the rabbits. After that, it was only Easter baskets and Easter eggs for Easter. I never bought bunny rabbits for Easter ever again.